Hey, we're live, episode 165, This Life of Tech. I am Jason.
Still the bad guy in my new bunker at an undisclosed location.
And I'm still TK, and he's in Indiana, by the way.
Maybe.
Maybe. Oh, man.
What's going on? Y'all all have a good week sitting at home?
Well, I mean, I had a good work week. Yeah. Yes. We technically didn't have class yesterday, and we technically don't have class on Monday, although it was a little confusing because the statement from the provost was don't have live class, but we encourage you to interact with your students. And so I think those of us that are reasonable said, well, look, I could probably use a day off too. So there's no live class. Here's some bonus work. That way it's optional. You're not obligated in case you have things to do, whatever, right? But apparently some people decided to give tests and exams. And it got some of the parents so riled up they went on Facebook. And then we got another email reminding us.
For those of you that don't understand plain spoken English.
Yeah. Well, the whole situation just, I'm really mesmerized by it. So okay, you send the email out, you set the direction, check, got it. So then somebody decides it's in their best interest to ignore that and do the exact opposite. I'm going to give my students exams. Okay, now I'm really interested in that. But then I'm doubly interested in the parents that get so upset that they go on Facebook to complain to the university president. The whole situation just mesmerizes me.
Everybody's, unless I've missed something, pretty much everybody in the country is in the same situation, right? We're all in this together, right? Yeah. And what were they going to be doing? Are they going off? Are they going away for the weekend? What are they doing? Right?
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. Like I said, I chose to take it upon myself to make it a little easy on everybody, including myself. That's the message I interpreted from that email the first time. But
then the email say no live classes, so giving them a test that's basically take home, right?
That's right.
I don't see an issue with it.
There you go, Dan. Looking for the loophole. I got you.
Yeah, it said no live class. It's not a live class.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. And then you get a sufficiently large group, and there's always that one person that decides to get on their soapbox, and they're going to make a point. And so somebody hit reply all.
Oh boy!
And said they said something to the effect of, "Yeah, but I bet you expect us to be available."
Oh.
Okay,
well,
man.
That one person
was that the provost?
What's that?
Was that reply to the provost?
Yeah.
Nice.
I hope that professor had tenure.
I was going to say. So I was just getting ready to say. I hope they are happy with. I hope they're happy with where they're at in their career, because it's one of those life-changing moves.
It's a resume-changing event.
Well, it's interesting because the students are getting worn out. I mean, A, it's the end of the semester, and B, they're getting worn out because of the situation. And I think the faculty are getting restless. And it's just this really interesting mixing of dynamics where I'm perfectly comfortable. In fact, I'm probably more comfortable here than I am anywhere else because I just do it so much. Yeah. But I mean, I miss interacting with students in a room, and I miss my colleagues. But I'm okay, man. I can hold my shit together. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I think all three of us over the years have spent enough time working remote that this isn't a big deal.
Yeah, it doesn't stress me out as much as some other things. Like I got a delivery of booze coming today. That's stressing me out because I got to make sure that I get the lawn mowed in time for the delivery guy to be here, so that you know what I mean. Because I got to mow the lawn on the other side of the field, our other place where the garden is. That's my stress level right now. I need to go over there and get that done. So that
you're doing okay. You're fine.
Yeah. Well, because what I don't care about the beer or anything. I want the mead because I got some mead delivered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, that's my level of discomfort. I want to get my booze.
My only discomfort is I can't go to the gym. I've got elastic band. I got a bunch of stuff to work out here, but it's largely prison yard workout style. And I want to get back into the gym. It's you can maintain, but it's you get in that routine where it's part of that every day.
Right,
And,
right.
And that's the one thing, because there's, a certain calming effect with that. But yeah, that would be, I mean, because like I said, unless I'm on the road going somewhere to travel, I do everything right here. So, and we're really engaged in doing analytics for the coronavirus and customers and things like that. And so, it's you get to be thoughtful, you get to think, I'm interacting with coworkers and things like that. So for me, and we're doing it kind of like we always do it on Google Meet or something like that, right?
Right.
But I think you look around as the nation, right? You're the when they start yanking people off buses because they don't have masks on something that's optional and telling people they can't go to church, but yet you can go walk into Home Depot, right? That's where people can't. People are not gonna. They can't go. Wait a second. I can walk into Home Depot and buy all the mulch I want, but I can't exercise my constitutional right to go to church, right? And you can disagree with that, right? And say, well, we all need to stay home. But I think you combine that with the fact that data and information across media is fungible right now, and people are starting to realize that. But if you watch one channel, it starts with the death count. You watch another, it starts with data that's wildly changing, and then you get people online where and the people that are worried about that are worried about. There's a significant population that's worried about their constitutional rights. And because I'm doing data analytics for all this, I spend a lot of time reading a lot of different points of view on how this is affecting people. And the healthcare thing is one thing, but people not being free to move, right, is a fundamental right of Americans, as opposed to what went on in the Soviet Union in the 40s and 50s and things like that. And not having the freedom to move and not completely understanding because exactly how this works, right? And why this is different when the numbers change so rapidly, right? That's getting, I think in the civil unrest piece should start to concern people, right? Not that, I'm advocating for it, but people are people, and that herd mentality is being like, hey, you're not keeping me locked up anymore. When they're telling people like here that you can't sit on the beach. Well, I can go to the park and I can sit down. Why can't I sit on the beach?
Right.
Right. If you're 6 feet apart, if your kids are out playing, my kids can go out in the backyard and play. What's the difference if we're all safely apart from each other? Fundamentally, I think people lack that. There's some things that people don't understand. And then in Virginia, the governor Friday afternoon at 3:00 tried to, he started signing laws from this past legislative session that people really have heartburn with, right? Mm-hmm. A significant portion of the population when it's about gun rights and some other things, right? And, Virginia is Virginia. It was the capital of the Old South. And there's some nuance.
And you can still remember when it was.
Exactly. I helped build the state house. But that's to me when you start saying let's just say that if you just go with, hey, the coronavirus has scared a lot of people, and actually it's COVID-19. Actually, the COVID scared a lot of people, and it's restricted people's ability, their freedom to go do what they want and feel safe doing it. That's when weird stuff starts to happen on the back end. Yeah, and I don't think we're I think there's thoughtful politicians and thoughtful police and things like that are going, okay, how do we manage this long term, and how do but as we flatten the curve, and as we start to go the thing, there has to be a rational sense of, you can't listen to Fauci on this because he wants everybody to have papers to travel.
Yeah,
right? And
not going to happen.
Yeah, and it may happen. It may happen in San Francisco or New York where people are like, okay, I'll do that. A really high population density, but go to Alabama and try to get somebody to do that. Go to most places where, and I think being rational about it is, we have micro regions, right? Every state is different. Every county is different, right? Of how this reacts. And telling people in Montana they have to do the same thing as people in New York City is disingenuous.
It's the same way with healthcare.
But that's what I'm saying, right? When people all the time, when you talk about ACA and how we applied ACA back in the day, and be like, oh, we got to do what, let's just do what Sweden does. Well, you give me any problem and say, hey, it only affects 5 million people. It's like, hey, I'll go figure out healthcare in New York City, right? That's really what you're saying. I'll figure that out in New York City. Now let's do it over 6 time zones.
I think maybe you just mean one of the boroughs in New York
Right.
City.
50 independent healthcare institutions, right? Because healthcare is applied by the states.
Yep.
Right? There's federal oversight, there's federal programs, but the insurance industry is alive and well in all 50 states. How do we do that? And then say, wait a second, we're going to yank the healthcare industry out of it and make it a federal program. You can say that, but the healthcare industry is not going away. Right? They're not. It's just, and then people go, well, healthcare got more expensive. I said, yeah, you had a system, and then you added a layer of federal bureaucracy on it that was
Right.
heavy-handed, and then you're surprised that it's more expensive. Right?
Compliance to anything, it increased the costs.
Right. But if you look, like I have friends of mine that are in the healthcare industry, and their problem is trying to spend all that money appropriately, because the money's showing up. Right. And,
Right.
and it's like blaming Trump for lack of masks or anything else. It's like blaming every other president for anything else that goes wrong. When, again, if you say, hey, why didn't this work perfectly? We had a failure of imagination. Nobody imagined this would happen. And I think what largely the media plays is, oh, there was a meeting about this. There was a meeting about this. Nobody, the federal government has think tanks on everything. And how many can you react on every day of the week? Because if you do, you're going to paralyze the nation.
Right.
Right. And I think that's, when we start seeing what goes on here, I mean, even in our cul-de-sac, we all come out and there's like a ring of safety. Everybody walks to a certain level, and the dogs go in and hang out and all that, but all the people come in and they get to a ring of safety, but we still manage to communicate and do what humans do and get from each other what you need to be part of that tribe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right.
do you think it was just naive on our part to believe that, especially with, basically every 2 years, another coronavirus coming out, that it would not wind up catching as widespread here? Or was it ignorance?
I believe this. I think that this is the 19th virus. And I'll say this, I'm not a big fan of Bill Maher in general, but he nailed it on, we don't talk honestly about things anymore. Right? We don't want to say it's the Chinese, thing. Well, the C in COVID stands for Chinese, right? And MERS was Middle East, SARS was this, and we've always talked about things as their place of origin.
Spanish.
Because that matters, right? We're not saying the Chinese people did this, right? We're saying the thing emanated in China, right? If more hardliners are saying, hey, the CCP did this, I think there needs to be an honest discussion about how this happened, right? And some of it is here, right? And why was Italy so infected, right? As opposed to other places, right? And
They all live together, they're cramped.
well, no, Italy in particular has a huge garment industry, and a made in China tag on clothing doesn't get you the same price as a made in Italy thing. And so, but they don't have enough garment workers. So there's daily flights from Wuhan, I think it's to Milan, and they shut down the factories for Chinese New Year, and everybody goes back to where they live, and most of them go back to Wuhan. Well, then they came back, and all of a sudden now everybody's infected, right? And have an honest talk about this and why. But even now, if somebody has stage 4 cancer and they get corona, it goes down as a COVID death, right? And we're jumping numbers in there. So statistically, to be able after the fact to do the forensic analysis after the fact and say, okay, here's how many people actually died solely from COVID, right? There's 29 people in a nursing home in Virginia that died that were given COVID death tags. They were all elderly. They all had pre-existing conditions, right? And I think, like I said, I've read some wacko stuff, people on one end of the far spectrum or not, but we've just not had an honest discussion. And I think there's stuff like this that happens all the time. We had SARS, we had MERS, we had H1N1, right? Nobody flipped out about H1N1, right? But a lot of it comes down to what they call the R naught. If I have it, how many people if I breathe on you, what's the average number of people that get it? The R naught of all these was lower than COVID, right? But now we're on that backslide. And so take a look at it. We'll get a vaccine for it. But I would say that, for example, because I've traveled the globe and gone to some pretty nasty places, I will guarantee you I have coronavirus, I get corona antibodies in me.
Oh,
But
sure.
they probably labeled it as the flu before, right? And I think now this is public health's big day, right? They got to come out of the woodwork and everybody got to listen to them and they got to clamp down, right? People are going to be suspect to try this again, right? So the public policy discussion has to go, and people are, how many jobless claims do we have? Right? People are not they're not gonna fall for the banana in the tailpipe if it's gonna hammer the economy again. How many restaurants aren't gonna recover? Right?
A lot.
Yeah.
And, one of our guest speakers yesterday in class was the CEO for Equinox. And
great guest speaker.
What's that?
Great guest speaker.
Yeah. He's also a University of Michigan Ross graduate. He had said that they had to make some tough decisions. And one of the things they did was the lower paid employees they furloughed because they can get more. Basically they would be able to get the exact amount of pay they were making from the federal government, and so their HR department helped walk them through the process so they could do it. What he did is said one of the decisions he made was, as his employees proved that they filed the paperwork, he continued to pay them their health care as part of their package, so that way they wouldn't go without health care. All this, so
that's a big company, and he can be thoughtful.
Yep.
And say, I'm going to balance. As a business owner, I'd say, hey, I've paid unemployment insurance for for how long is it? For decades.
Yeah.
Right. Now I'm gonna use some of that, and I'm still going to be thoughtful about how I can take care of my employees.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So we also had the CFO for American Airlines on, which was another interesting discussion because they're basically unions everywhere, and so they have to still keep paying their people. But their discussions is largely about negotiations with the federal government,
right?
In terms of payback and stuff like that. Then I can't remember who the lady was. She's pretty high up for, I think it was Citibank. I'll have to go back and look at her her bio, but she's of this opinion that absolutely hates remote work to begin with. And says this is making everything even worse for them. Now, really, it's I know the real reason in the financial services industry, things become much more of a challenge when it comes to adhering to all of the laws and regulations. In order to be able to have remote work in a financial services industry, there's a lot more compliance-like things that have to go on because you're dealing with people's money. Mm-hmm. And so they just don't want to deal with that. And there are some things at a financial services company that you can't do remotely. But it's a small percentage. The only problem is that when you're like a Citibank or a Bank of America or Capital One, you're talking about a small percentage. It's still a couple 100,000 people. So,
right. Well, and maybe I didn't mean to cut you off, but keep this in mind because I think that's a good segue to what you were talking about earlier this week that you wanted to examine, TK, with this idea of like COBOL as an example of, a lot of that compliance, at least as I experienced it, was drafted in a way that it didn't assume a 21st century globalized economy that's digital. It assumed a traditional brick and mortar only business model. And so you can't fault them for not wanting to inconvenience a business of that size, trying to force an adaptation in the compliance. I mean, that's really up to, like, for instance, the SEC to do that, not the bank itself.
Well, it's not really the SEC in this case. It's more things that are with the Federal Reserve. So whether or not,
it's not that it can't be done.
It absolutely can be. And as a matter of fact, during all of this, each of the, so like for me, the NCUA, the FDIC, they put out similar guidance to lax all of the compliance rules in order to get people to not have to be, physically in a building. And they'll wind up, there'll be ways. I mean, all it is, you got to make sure that, when people are dealing with certain things, there's, their cameras on, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's not impossible. It's, you'll have to go, which will be funny when we start talking about COBOL, because back when COBOL was really being used, you had dumb terminals. Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of the things that I said, all right, I'm going to, and, hats off to Citrix, because their stuff works even on a Raspberry Pi. It works great. VMware, I hate you. You guys suck.
Shout out to one of our sponsors.
Yeah. While their VDI is great, in order to run that on a ARM, basically an ARM processor, you have to go to one of their partners and pay for the client in order to work. And I'm like, this is absolutely stupid. I'm paying for the VDI. I should have the client for anything that I want, in terms of that's out there. All Raspberry Pi is a Linux-based operating system running on the ARM processor rather than, AMD or Intel.
Right.
Nope. Go to our partner, and I honestly, their partner actually has some pretty cool stuff to manage all these devices, but I shouldn't be forced into that mode when I'm paying for the system. And
amen. Preach it, brother.
Yeah. What's that?
Preach it.
Yeah. Well, even though in order to get it to work on the Raspberry Pi for Citrix, there's a couple of things you had to do. And, I figured it out before my young guns were able to do it to get it working, including, which is great, we can have our entire call center working at home through Citrix.
Yep.
With audio.
Yep.
Utilizing the soft phone technology that we have at the credit union, and it is flawless.
It's clean, right?
Oh my gosh, it was crystal clear. So, to me, this opens up to where we can have a lot more people working remote. But it goes back to a dumb terminal, something that you can't put anything on. You boot it up, you click an icon, and then you're in, and you just can't, transmit things back and forth. And I love the conversation when people will say, yeah, but then they can take all of the data. They could print it out. I'm like, they can just take their phone and take a picture of it too.
You're right. Right. But if that's your risk profile,
it doesn't change.
I mean, if you've got it down to that, I think you're doing really, really well. I was always a big fan when we were using Citrix at the first startup I worked at, right? And this is early 2000s. We used Wise terminals.
Yeah. And
it was literally powered on, and it would pull down through the DHCP lease all the information to connect right into the Citrix MetaFrame farm. And you got that was virtual desktop before the word virtual existed.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it's beautiful. I absolutely love it. I mean, the only thing that we're using right now is because it's it's their kind of entry level. They still have a computer in the office because we're not using the true VDI,
right?
Which then it works a hell of a lot better than remote desktop. Remote desktop sucks.
Yeah. For such a widely deployed protocol that's been around for quite some time, I'm surprised of how bad it sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd almost rather use VNC, but you know what I really like that I use in my private cloud? It's a VNC replacement protocol called Spice.
Yeah.
And it's basically encrypted VNC. It's really nice. It's really good.
Yeah, but it's that's going to be what changes a lot of things. Is we'll go back. Who's it hurt the most? Well, it hurts like Microsoft, because now you're not spending all those licenses to Microsoft. I mean, utilizing VDI is about the same price as buying everyone a laptop. So,
right.
But I don't have to deal with the hardware.
And you retain control over what's going on inside that image.
Yep. People get upset when they don't have a persistent desktop, but I'm like, you should be saving everything in, whether or not you're using G Suite and their stuff, or if you're using Office 365, shouldn't be saving anything to your, local desktop anyway.
Right. Well, right. Do you want to get upset about that, or do you want to be able to work remote?
Yeah.
I'd rather work remote.
I'd be interested to see it from an employee perspective. Everybody thinks that working remote is going to be great, right? When you tell them, hey, you don't have to come into the office, right? There's general euphoria about the place. But once people get home and they have to create their own structure, right? I've got to get up at I've got to do things and create an environment in their home that is conducive for work. And what I say, segregates you from the rest of your life, like you're going to work. And then not being able to spin around in your desk chair and ask somebody a question and things like that. And to become a little bit more self-sufficient, right? Because that's really what and manage your own emotions, and your own, the emotional curve of the day of, thing, and keeping with lunch, right? And those types of things, and getting that. I'd be interested after this, when people get back to work, is talk to your people. And I mean, genuinely get from them how they felt, right? Because I would say that probably after the first week or so, there's a certain level of angst, right? Because it's so far different from what most people have done that, and it's the same way with telecommuting, right? A friend of ours, our kids go to school together. The wife had been a remote worker for years, and she left and went to another company, but she had to show up every day, and she lasted about a month, right? Because for her, it was the exact opposite. There was too much of that, office gossip and things like that. Now, some people are used to that, right? And they're used to that banter back and forth. She felt that she was totally unproductive. And when they wouldn't, when she brought that up, they wouldn't let her work from home. She started looking for another job, and she got something that fit her comfort level. It'll be interesting to see, kind of as that subset you have, how emotionally and intellectually this has affected people for what they want to do, right? And
yeah, I think with the big issue, which you really hit on, is it's not that we gradually went to a work from home. It was overnight. Everyone's working from home.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of my IT folks, no issue, because what are they doing? They're answering the phone calls from their house as if they were in a cubicle, and they're solving problems, and the day still keeps going. But the people that aren't used to that, they don't have that structure. And you're absolutely right. It's the structure that's going to make people unproductive because they don't have one. And we did it all at once without essentially training them on how to work from home.
Right. Because you know what happens? They probably have their computer, but they either have like their iPad or some secondary device there, and they have the news. They're getting news feeds. And if you sit and listen to to the news all day, that's, I don't care what source you listen to it from, there's going to be natural fear and angst that creep in.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if you're doing that, then your internal self is thinking about that, not thinking about work. And then you have nothing to distract you from the fear that you have about certain things and from your angst, and to be able to focus on work. And I think that's just a huge challenge that people have to that they have to come to grips with.
Yeah,
very true. It's very true. And I mean, the majority of the workforce is more like factory workers in a way. Yeah. It's process oriented. It's and I come in. It's time to make the donuts. I do the same thing day in, day out, and that routine doesn't exist for them at home.
It's Fred Flintstone, right? You get on the dinosaur when the whistle blows, and you get off the dinosaur when the whistle blows, right? And that's as we drive deeper into the 21st century, before this, everybody's like, oh, we need more virtual work, right? And think about it. I mean, if you can do this effectively, I mean, I'm talking from a management standpoint, from a financial standpoint. How can I lower my loaded cost? I don't need a big fancy office. right? I've got a headquarters and I've got a core group of people that are showing up because we have to have that function to a certain extent. But the more people I can put on remote work, the less square footage I need.
Yeah.
Loaded cost of each employee is lowered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the lady that was speaking, she had said that she actually does not like remote work because she doesn't get as much collaboration. She said, but what is also equally as damaging is putting people in cubicle farm where they're 3 feet from each other. She goes, so in her world, it's people have to have a proper workspace.
Right.
And then she was getting into, this is the part where like a lot of the speakers were, including the dean, who's the teacher of the class, trying to say that remote work and forcing people to have cameras on and things like that is racially biased because not everyone has broadband. And so I had to say, are you not including their smartphone? Because if they've got 4G, that's broadband. And 93% of the United States has broadband.
Right.
And so just from 4G, forget the cable provider. So
Right.
you're telling me they don't have an iPhone or an Android phone that's been made in the last, 10 years? Because you can do video. And so the professor was actually having to use his hotspot because the Wi-Fi in the basement for him was spotty. And I'm like, guess what? You can't tell me with your hotspot, which is just 4G, that you can't do enough bandwidth to do our class online with video.
It's the old thing that says, unless you told me, I wouldn't have known whether you were on 4G or Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going, and then when you look at it globally, the majority of the world has 4G. So I'm going, all the countries in which, this bank was operating in, I looked at, like, here's the stats. I'm like, so the lowest percentage of people that you have to deal with in your organization, the country was at 88% 4G. And of course, the places where it's not, you're talking about some in Africa, some in South America, but I'm going 88%.
Yeah, that other 12% is not in a situation where they're particularly worried about banking.
Yeah.
Right.
They're more worried about like tigers eating them.
Right.
Yeah.
They're worried about food and shoes. Like they're worried about the base of Maslow's triangle, not the top.
Right.
Right.
So I basically was like, look, you're being disingenuous about this being, this type of thing, because you say you don't have high-speed internet and you're discounting the phone.
Well, it's. I mean, I wasn't there. I didn't hear the conversation, but to me, it sounds like somebody taking an opportunity, as we've talked about, even with the media around COVID-19, to manufacture a problem where there isn't one.
Yeah.
Right. I got a problem looking for a solution.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But that's,
it's the same thing when people say having state ID, needing that ID to vote is racially biased. And I go, you had to provide your ID to get a cell phone.
Well, actually, I'll say it like this. When you talk about voting in particular, because now you start saying, even what anachronistic languages are a lot of these voting machines using? I don't know the answer to that, but they're not using the latest and greatest with the greatest cybersecurity, all this other stuff, right? So if we say, and I'll use India as a model, because India not so long ago had their first free election. If you're going to say, I want everyone to have an ID, right? We passed the motor voter bill. We did all these things, right? So if you're around the places where IDs are being given, you can get access to vote. You can register to vote, right? So that works. If I'm running, if it's TK running the system of how we're going to get max participation to vote and guarantee we have legitimacy in the system, if we're still going to walk into a place and push a button, cast a ballot, do that kind of thing, if we're not going to, because I believe we have the problem right now with getting everybody to be able to vote on their phone, right? Because we just discussed, what percentage of America has access to a phone. Getting people to vote on an app on their phone, that's not a cybersecurity issue. It's not a legitimacy issue. It's a political issue when you say, hey, we're going to do everything we can do to legitimize that voter. right?
Right.
And
Right.
cut down on fraud. That becomes that's the football, right? It's not our ability to do it technically. If we're going to say we want to require an ID, which I believe we should, then as a government, you have to remove every obstacle. What the Indians did is even in remote places, they set up little kiosks where everybody, they committed to it. Now it's different because this was their first big time to vote free. It was a new thing for them, right? And it's like, hey, things we take for granted and have less than half the country's participation in, like voting, other countries are clamoring for that. And when they get it, they don't want to leave anybody out, right? So if we start from the fundamental fact that we want things to be legitimate, right? And we can argue whether everybody wants that, right? Because some people just want their folks to get in office and they don't care how, right? And that's in every country and every election around the world. That's not U.S., right? Is how do we make it easy for people to get an ID? Right. And that's the true nature of it. If you're telling right now, the first thing I want to know is what percentage of the voting population does not have a valid ID? Then let's work backwards from that number to fix that. Right. It's not political. It's not anything. That we have a simple supply and demand problem. We're requiring you to have an ID and you don't have one. How do we make it easy for you to get one?
I'm trying to figure out. I don't know that I don't know how someone could not have an ID in the United States.
I don't either. But if you're going to say we want max participation, and we're going to require an ID, let's start with an honest discussion of how many people actually don't have an ID.
Well, that gets back to your thing that you had said earlier. We have to start having some honest discussions about.
Right. And the discussion that people want is one of get into your feelings. Because if I can get into your feelings, I can manipulate the outcome a lot easier than if we talk about facts, right? If 90% of the voting population already has an ID, all I got to do is go talk to the other 10%. And I'll bring the machine to their house. We'll put it in the back of a car, right? You get in, we take your picture, and we legitimately make you a voter. And we welcome you to the voting population, and we encourage you to get there, right? And the next step is doing it on a smart, if we can mail in ballots, if we can mail in absentee ballots and those are considered legitimate, let's get it onto mobile device, right? Or on a computer, but it can be certificate based, it can be token based. There's so many legitimate ways to account for the transference of information and to archive it and to make it immutable. Why? I don't see why we can't do that.
Hey, check this out. So I found the answer to your question of how many at least voting age adults don't have an ID. Check this. This is crazy. 12%.
Well, yeah, we were right around 88, 90%, right? I mean, that's,
Yep.
Yep.
You know what coincides with that too?
What?
Illiteracy. That's 14%. Seems like we have a core problem, right? I mean, you're talking about 30, 40 million people, roughly, right? If you take 350 million total.
Yeah. Did you? I'm just curious because what I saw from 2012 was only 3 million Americans don't have ID. Now because the first things that come up right now are all the people that don't have ID for the new voter ID. Not voter ID, but the real ID laws.
Yeah, I'm quoting the American National Election Study from 2012.
But yeah, so in 2012, no, I just saw something different.
No, that's all right. But this is why it's important to talk about it. And this is from a study published in 2015 about that data.
Yeah. So the one that I have came from NPR. That I've said it's 3 million, and just looking at the highlights.
Well, you're right. And so it depends the strata you're looking at because the data is stratified. So they break it down based on like different socioeconomic demographics. And so certain demographics, like inner city young blacks are going to be higher than middle-aged whites.
Sure.
Even if the whites are impoverished, right? I mean, so it depends on how you look at it. So I quickly averaged some of those numbers together and came up with, what did I say, 12%? Yeah. Well, my point, especially in taking those two disparate data points, literacy and ID, is, well, look, how are you going to get an ID if you can't read?
Right.
You ain't getting it.
This is what's I would say even more interesting about those numbers. That still means 30% of the population isn't going out to vote, and they have an ID and could vote.
That's right, which is another problem.
So
And they can read. I mean,
right, they can read, they could vote, they're choosing not to. And when people get upset about whoever is in office, when I go, well, they won with only a quarter of Americans voting.
Yeah.
Because the other quarter voted for someone else.
Right. Right.
If we even actually got to 50% voter turnout, which I don't know that we have in recent times. I think most voter turnouts when we're in like the 40th, the 40%.
Well, that's what allows politicians to get 51% of the vote and claim it's a landslide.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's staggering.
Which is technically only 25.1.
Right. Yeah.
To me, it's staggering the lack of turnout to vote in, let's say, an 18 to 35 demographic. The complete lack of participation is mind-boggling to me.
Well, I believe that it's because we don't teach civics. We don't require civics anymore. We require social studies. Yeah. And it's a different mindset. If you don't spend a good portion of time teaching people what the intent of our founding documents was and why it's important to vote, and you basically, what are people encouraged to vote?
Right.
I mean, that's, when Jared was turning 18, that was a big deal in the House for me to, to get after him and say, hey, you have to do this. Right. And it's like, I had my preference of who he would vote for, but I said, I don't even care who you vote for. Just get in the booth and do it.
That's right. Exercise your.
I know who I want to win. Right. You have to decide who you want to win and get in there and vote.
Well, and I think the three of us agree that it's almost your civic obligation as a citizen to participate. And I think it's a lack of civics. It's a lack of critical thinking, and I think it's a reinforcement of general apathy with the system. Right. People somehow have lost the ability to connect. If I actually go vote, I can participate in fixing a broken system, and the system being broken, and somehow now there's this pervasive idea that it can't be fixed at all. So why participate?
Well,
which I don't get. It
can't be fixed if no one puts any effort into it.
Well, exactly. Right. Well, and doing nothing takes less energy than doing something.
Right. If they wanted to take less energy from, they could just go register as one of the independent parties, and then they only have to really worry about voting in November.
That's one of the things I like about North Carolina is I'm not registered in one of the two main parties, but I can still vote
in the primaries.
Yep.
So in Maryland, you can't. You can only vote for whatever party you're registered in. And Indiana, I think, is the same way.
Yeah.
But
in Virginia, you can vote in whatever primary. It's not a big deal. I like Georgia has what they call a jungle primary. That all the candidates, doesn't matter what party you're from, you can have 7 or 8 different candidates, and they have a runoff from the top 2. So you're not guaranteed to have one Republican or one Democrat. You're guaranteed to have the top 2 vote getters, which I think I like that. I like that.
I do too.
So I'm also back when it was in the earlier foundations of our country. I mean, TK, you were there, where you actually voted for the president and the vice president, and they came from 2 different political parties.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how we did it. Well, when I lived in California, and we recalled the governor and ended up electing Schwarzenegger. It was a free for all. It was like 50 people, and the LA Times started printing everything out, and they got it down to, I think after a couple of weeks of intermediary voting, we got it down to Schwarzenegger, a porn star, Gary Coleman, and I think somebody else.
That's perfect.
It was awesome.
That is absolutely perfect.
So isn't technically then you had 3 porn stars?
Was Gary Coleman a porn star? Pretty strong moment in his career.
Hey man, but I'll tell you what, that was one of the few times I've gone to vote, and that place was packed, and the line was outside, wrapped around the building.
I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I know in Virginia, like every time I go to vote, there's no lack of people there voting. Right?
But that makes sense. I mean, you're basically in a military town. Voting more.
Most of the people that on like active duty military, most of them vote absentee.
Right.
Most of those are absentee. That was a big, that's always a big thing when they, they come up and they say, oh, we didn't count all the absentees, but we called the election. Well, everybody that's voted absentee, because when I was on active duty, I was a Florida resident. And, I used to have to call my dad and be like, who's this guy? What's he, I don't just, time to research all this. But, now here, even the retirees, probably the retirees that stay around here, you get active in the community and you get thoughtful about what you want from your government or don't, right? And I even down to the dog catcher type, that level of election. And, like our governor right now, a racist piece of crap, is, when he said we're going to lock the state down with COVID, he did it arbitrarily, just said June 10th. And everybody's trying to figure out why a random Wednesday in June was where he picked it. Well, Tuesday was the Republican primary, and he's a Democratic, hardcore, partisan Democrat governor. And whether that was intentional or not, because of his past actions, he's not getting the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, right.
People are like, it's almost pitchforks in the street, right? And that, it's one of the peculiarities. Like if you look at in Virginia, Northern Virginia controls the whole state because you've got with Loudoun County, all the Fairfax, all the counties right around DC have more voters than every county but Richmond and Virginia Beach. Right, the 1.5 million voters there. If you look at the state, the whole state's red except for, Virginia Beach is light blue, and then Richmond itself is hard dark blue, and then Northern Virginia is dark blue. Well, Northern Virginia being dark blue alone has more voters in the state than everybody else.
Right.
And so we're getting, this thing. And now you had one of the Republicans in the state house put up legislation to create, effectively an electoral college within Virginia.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. And I think that'll get shot down like a low-flying duck. But when you start looking at those maps and you get a large, and it comes back to it's just the landowners. Well, it's farmers, right? There's a big agrarian, the big agrarian tradition in Virginia, and those are the things that are interesting to me to see, right? Because we go back to, hey, we don't teach civics, we demonize full legitimate identification of somebody. And then we complain when half the people don't participate, and then we complain about the outcome. Well, where do you stop the chain of bad things happening, and how do you do that, right?
Right.
But I mean, like I said, if we even just go look at all the voting machines, right? How many of them are using modern computing and security techniques? I don't know the answer to that, but it's always an issue.
Yeah, well, and what always shocks me too is like there's not a standard way of a machine operating. It seems like because there's all kinds of different machines, makes and models, different states, different counties, different cities use different ones. Like that's what
50 different models, one for each state. Yeah. Because I mean, it just wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it doesn't, but it does for me. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
but you get a very low population state like New Hampshire, for example. And the quaint notion that they're the first, and people show up to watch. I can't remember what little village or town it is in New Hampshire, but that one little place where the whole national media shows up to effectively watch like 100 people vote.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
They have great participation. Why? Because the eyes of the nation are on them. And it's not just to them a civic responsibility, right? It becomes an event.
Mm-hmm. Is that the city where basically they've the however they have voted has basically predicted the president?
Yeah, but it's like as New Hampshire goes, the rest of the country, and when it doesn't, it's far and few between, right? But just that concept that because people pay attention to it, people are more likely to be participant, right?
Well, yeah, and I think, tell me what you think about this. To me, part of the root cause of the apathy is the same thing with jury duty. Like, why is it so burdensome to go serve on a jury? This is what amazes me that people lose sight of. Because when it's your turn to be judged by your peers, all those assholes don't want to be there either. And that's who you want judging you, is a bunch of people that really don't want to be there? No, man, it's your civic obligation to participate. But for some reason, as a culture, we've allowed that to be relegated to a chore. Like, people would rather wash shitty socks.
Dan, I'm going to ask this. Do you think you would stand a chance of being selected as a juror?
Me? Probably not.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't think any of us would probably be actually selected. They would look at it as being too highly educated. They don't want that.
Well, or you have an opinion.
Yeah.
Right. Right. The
first thing Jason's going to say is, I don't identify or with your.
The phrase I used was, I do not recognize your authority to act as a tyranny.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your time. Boy, thank you for your time. Right. If you go in there and if you go in there and say you're a C-level leader in a company, you're off, because one side or the other is going to go, that guy's going to seem like he can really push people in a certain direction or not.
Right.
And if you get to the people that, especially if it's a high profile case, I don't have an opinion. Okay. Yes, you do. You're either lying or you're a potato head.
Yeah. Right.
And in Virginia Beach, a lot of times you get a lot of older folks, right? Retired, semi-retired, and they're like, yeah, I got time. I get a free lunch. I'll listen, and hopefully there'll be some salacious stuff that'll come out. And it's like, go back to the OJ trial. People didn't have an opinion about that before they sat down,
right? One
way or another.
Right. It's not like you don't know who OJ Simpson is.
Well, and it's not like you didn't see it on TV. It's like, were you cloistered in a monastery during the time, and you just came out and said, "What happened, OJ?" Right? No.
It's a lot of people that don't have an ID.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
They don't tell them, evidently. I wonder how many people in California don't have an ID.
What are you insinuating?
I'm just, because OJ said all this stuff happened in California. So for the people that had to go for that jury trial, I'm curious as to how many in California wouldn't have had ID. Which to me, if you don't have ID, you probably don't have high speed internet. I mean, of course, I know that it wasn't really there in OJ, but
yeah, we're back talking about 1995, right, or 1994, right?
Yeah,
but cable television was still there,
right? Well, actually, two things. I mean, it wasn't so long after the first Gulf War, which really put CNN and 24-hour news on the map. And then subsequent to the OJ trial, that's when Court TV came out, and they put cameras in every courtroom.
Yeah.
Right. And I think when you do that, you stop, because of the nature of human beings, you stop doing absolutely what's correct for your clients, and you start putting on a show.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same. I believe, at the federal level anyway, it's the same in Congress, where you elect your congressman for 2 years, right? And they're supposed to fix potholes and do that thing and generate legislation to do that. And then you've got the Senate, which by design at 6-year intervals of being elected is supposed to be thoughtful and deliberate. Well, now when you stuff a camera and a microphone in everybody's face, everybody's got to be smart. Everybody's got to be glib. Everybody's got to have the right answer. And everybody's got to be completely knowledgeable of every issue that's out there. It's an onerous task. I don't care what party they're in. I don't envy that level of coverage, right? And I think what you find is the folks that are kind of under the radar, the ones that don't bask in the warmth of cameras, lights, they're the ones that are really getting stuff done. That's, the nuts and bolts legislators that are showing up every day. And I was in DC, we were having a meeting, there were some high profile people there, but the most engaging person I talked to on cyber was a backbencher congressman who's been grinding, right? And grinding that legislation. He just does it and he goes, it all gets stopped in the Senate because there's 100 people over there that enjoy the limelight, and most of them are elderly, and trying to get them to understand anything about security and privacy and technology is a yeoman's task.
Right.
That's the frustration level. But I think the backbenchers, when it comes to really trying to keep the wheels moving for the Byzantine bureaucracy that we have, they're the ones that are doing it because everybody else is too busy in front of a camera.
Looking for that soundbite.
They're all fluffing a microphone.
Oh, my friends. What a beautiful Sunday it is.
It is. Happy Easter.
Indeed.
How are my Ghost Reaper peppers doing?
Not good.
No?
For some reason, man, pardon me, we had really nice weather this week.
Yeah.
And so we took a lot of our seedlings and stuff like that. We were germinating and put them outside. And like my other peppers and my beans took off, dude. Took off. But man, these reapers don't want to sprout yet.
Poor little Ghost Reapers.
Yeah. So I put them back inside their grow box, and they're inside under heat lamps. But my strawberries are killing it.
That's the plan, right? Man, it's been interesting to see now because, here's like strawberry capital planet, right? We have the strawberry festival and everything. It's going to be interesting to see because that happens beginning before Memorial Day, in a few weeks. It'll be interesting to see how, getting people out managing, because even all the farms now, they're all putting out on social media, they're boxing up all the strawberries. They don't have U-Pick this year.
Right.
Which, think about what that cost is of having to pay people to get out of their pick instead of letting U-Pick go. So yeah, that's really, that to me, that's another, really interesting thing is there's a big culture of going to local farms and getting things. And I live on that side of town now, so it's very easy for me to go out and go pick up vegetables and things like that. But they're doing everything pre-order, and you just show up and grab. And I personally, I like touching the vegetables and things. I mean, I grew up picking vegetables on a farm, so I like, to me, that's a part of the process.
Right. Well, I can tell you, like, our chickens get here, I think, the first week of May.
Your Ickens?
50 chickens. So half of them are for eggs and half are for meat.
Soon to be 200 chickens, because that's what they do.
Yeah. Well, you know how, I mean, you can expect how I am. I'm like, well, look, you buy breed for specific reasons. And we have a ratio of females to males, which means we need to build breeding boxes and separate them. We also need to tag all of them so we can control the genetic drift. And I got told I was going too far with it, so I just went home. But nobody likes a Mongoloid chicken. No, I mean,
nobody likes your Uncle Mom chickens.
Do you want to maximize your investment, or do you want to be lazy? Is kind of how I left it. But anyway, so we've already started to try and plan, depending on how long this goes, because all those chickens will reach maturity for eggs or meat within 6 months. So we've already started to develop ideas of how we're going to distribute this stuff without having a stand that people can come stand at and buy stuff.
Are you going to have a chicken petting farm now too?
Well, see,
You're going to be like whatever that. What is that show? Joe, whatever. Going to be some guy with a big cat farm that's now in jail. It's all over.
Oh, you talking about that Netflix show?
Yeah.
Oh no, I haven't seen it yet, so I have no idea. We've talked about having like
Jason's chicken petting farm,
a little what's called a hobby farm. So if the chickens get set up and they're working right, our next step are I think we'll do goats, pygmy goats, and then we'll do hogs.
Are those pygmy goats? Those are the ones that jump around everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm moving to High Point because I want to do goat yoga. We're bringing Jared. Jared is the chicken whisperer.
Really?
Oh yeah. There's the Hunt Club Forest, and it's a huge petting farm and everything. Along with, they do like the corn maze at Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
And they've got they train horses there and everything. That's what it really started as, and they've done all this other stuff. And the kids, when they were little, really loved doing their birthdays there because they do a hayride afterwards, and they get to ride the ponies and all this other stuff, right? So it's an unbelievable setup that they have there. And as Jared got older, when Jorah was little, he would the little kids would want to pick the chickens up and start chasing them around, and Jared would just go in the chicken coop, and all the chickens would come to him. He just pick one of them up real big. He was literally the chicken whisperer.
There you go, man. Yeah, so we'll see. I don't know. Then I want a donkey.
Are you going to make him talk in a Scottish accent?
I mean, maybe in my mind you will, but
Oh, donkey.
because you got to. I mean, we got foxes and stuff around here, man.
Right.
And so you got to protect all this stuff. And apparently, donkeys and alpacas do really well too. But I ain't down with alpacas. I'll get a donkey or two.
Why aren't you down with alpacas? Why where do we have the alpaca love?
Well, here's why, man. Because I've already been down the road of maybe we should have an alpaca farm and do it for the wool, and that's not a good way to go.
That then you become the WWE. You're like alpaca wrestling to get the wool off them.
Yeah. So then that went to, well, no, if we're going to do that, why don't we get sheep? Because you actually get for your investment, you get a more return, at least here in North Carolina. And then I'm like, yeah, dude, but now I got to have a flock of sheep, and now I'm a shepherd, and that has too much metaphoric meaning. And
well, I would imagine chickens are less labor intensive. It's like people that do dairy cattle. I mean, their life revolves around that, right? Technically, it's like building an app for your iPhone or Android. You're now a parent. You got to babysit that thing 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Well, no, and so we started building the chicken coop. Because there's three of us, three parts of the whole extended family that are in on this.
Cool.
And so we're all pulling our labor and our money. And so the coop will be mobile. You can move it with a tractor. And we have maybe like 10 acres of used to be horse pasture, but the horses are gone now. And we're going to rotate it through there. And so how this actually started was I was going to mention that we started to plant the crops for the chickens to eat. And so we've been planting different stuff. My big innovation is twofold. One, automatic doors. Everybody was like, well, you got to get up in the morning and let the chickens out of the coop because they're going to free range during the day. And then you got to close the door at night. I'm like, no. This is a simple problem. Just a little light sensor on an Arduino that just drops the gate and then picks it up on an actuator. And my poor wife was very astute in observing that, well, what if the chicken doesn't make it back in? I guess the fox is going to eat good that night. The chickens will learn real fast. And so that's taken care of. And then the next one is I'm going to build an automated mealworm farm. So see, now we're into this thing of like nested businesses within businesses. So you got the chicken farm, and that has spun off into a compost part of the business because you got to do something with all the compost, and it's actually good for the chickens. And if you got compost, you might as well grow mealworms in it, and then you can use the mealworms to feed the chickens. It's really good for them. But you can also sell the mealworms to like fishers, people that go fishing, whatever you call them.
Look at you.
I knew this was going to happen.
I told you. I mean, it's like I told you it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when.
Well, no, but I'm
so,
back when we were still doing the doctorate program, and
Mm-hmm.
I had everyone convinced Jason was moving to North Carolina because he wanted to be a chicken farmer. And so people come up to us like, wow, I mean, how many chickens? And he's like, what are you talking about? And then they would say, well, Dan said, and he's like, why would you listen to him? Well,
yeah, well, they're right there.
Oh, yeah.
So it's only a matter of time until
often asked and very rarely answered.
are more true than Nostradamus himself.
Right.
Nostradamus.
Yeah.
So we'll see, man. I got some more Reaper seeds. I didn't plant all of them, so I think I have another pack left. So I'll see. They could, I mean, because I know they're temperamental, so they could just take a little bit longer than the other ones.
You got to
So-
massage them, talk nice to them.
No, that's the chickens.
Yeah, that's.
If you start talking to your plants, we got to chat. What's North Carolina? What's North Carolina's position on growing weed? Are they still? Is that still against that?
I don't know, man. It's been evolving. Man, is it decriminalized here now?
I don't know.
I don't think it is. I think they're a bit behind the curve. I'd have to look it up to be certain because I thought it was up for vote, but got voted down a couple years ago. I think. Yeah, I think you can have. It's one of those weird situations like Maryland's this way, or it was, where you can have like a true prescription, but there's no dispensary system. So where are you getting it? There's no way to
Right.
get it.
You got to go across the state line, type of thing. It's like
Right. Where California was the exact opposite. Before California completely legalized it, In fact, one of the last things Schwarzenegger did was to decriminalize it. So if you got caught with weed in public, if it was like an ounce or under, it was basically classified as an infraction, kind of like a parking ticket.
Right.
And you didn't need a prescription. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
People got it twisted. You didn't need a prescription. You needed a doctor's recommendation. And that was just for the dispensary to have on record that there was a.
Could it be a guy that was a doctor at an IA? Or did it have to be an MD? Doctor, he said I could have it.
It's a good question. I think they had to be medical physicians. Now, see, here's the thing too. In California, unlike Maryland, there was no like centralized state level database that didn't exist. So you didn't have a card. Like in Maryland, you have to have a card because it's a prescription, and so
Right.
you're in a database. Then I don't know how it works here, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Did you see this? That as part of the new collective bargaining agreement for the NFL, they're no longer going to penalize positive tests for marijuana.
Yeah,
You start doing that, these high profile things like that. That's when you start, people start going, okay, how can we, I don't know, nationalize, but manage this in a correct fashion, right? They want to keep track of it statistically, that's fine, but it's no longer going to be a multi-game. It's like first time you get by the second offense you get 2 games, and it mounts up. That all of that, off field, keeping you off the field penalties are gone from that now.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's one of those things when I think about marijuana, and it's like as you compare it to alcohol and how people are when they're impaired, right? And how are we going to categorize that? How are we going to categorize that for vehicle purposes, for example, right? And it's one of the really cool things, and it's an old school thing that they do in Virginia. I don't know if they do it all throughout Virginia, but I know they do it in Virginia Beach. When a kid gets their driver's license, they'll get their learner's permit. Then they get when they get their first license, they get an appointment. And they have to go to court, and it's 2 times a week, I think. And they get all the new drivers. When you walk in, there's one of the sheriff's deputies there, and you hand them your learner's permit, and you walk in and you sit down. The judge is up there, and it's just a sea of parents and their kids. And the state's attorney walks out, Commonwealth attorney walks out and says, and they go through, here are the penalties for driving impaired. And they tell them, look, we are within the guidelines of Virginia statute allowed to prosecute you as an adult for driving impaired. And they list everything, right? And it's look, even if you're on a prescription, right, we can get you free. At first I thought this was going to be, some heavy-handed thing, but the way that they talk about it, and then the judge comes and talks about it from don't put me and the rest of my peers in a position to have to do this, right? You hold the keys for this. And it was a great discussion about personal responsibility. But the thing I liked about it is they just didn't demonize this. They're look, we know that, I'm not telling you what to do with the exception of getting behind the wheel once you've done it, right? And with the asking the kids, it's it really resonates with them because it's not like it's not what is that, those movies in the 50s and 60s like Reefer Madness, where somebody smokes one joint and they're out there raping and killing on their off time, right? And but it was an honest discussion about here's the penalty for doing that, right? And as we start to say, hey, how are we going to test for it? Right? What are going to be the tests? When people are oh, with the breathalyzer and whether you do it, whether you ask for a blood sample and things like that. And what are the legal ramifications of that? Have we gotten there yet? I don't pay attention to it. So I don't, but that's going to have to be a thing.
Probably.
Yeah. I think Colorado and Washington State have done some pretty progressive things. I mean, like you said, as far as the laws, I mean, they really already do exist. You don't need more or special laws.
It's just a testing aspect to determine.
Well, I think what mechanism are they going to determine you're impaired by?
Right.
Right.
Well, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard with marijuana because of its substance. I mean, it's not like alcohol at all.
Right. And even it's not like cocaine, right? Because for cocaine, they don't test for cocaine. They test for the processing chemicals.
Yeah. Well, and so with marijuana, you can test for its presence immediately, but usually what you're testing is the same thing, the metabolites of what it decomposes into in the body. But unlike cocaine, because cocaine burns out within a day,
Right.
Really, weed stays in for quite some time.
Right.
Quite some time. So how do you administer it?
Are we going to make them, urinate in a cup and then go test it? I wonder how. I mean, that's probably.
Well, see, but this is part of the problem I have is same thing with like breathalyzer. I'm not condoning drinking and driving in any way, shape, or form, but I don't know that I'm a big fan of putting a bunch of. You're putting people in charge of testing that have an incentive to have a positive test, right? And that's a rigged system. So the way that testing gets implemented and handled, to me, it has to be carefully examined, especially when you're dealing with something that is chemically more complicated, right? Marijuana is much more complicated testing for than alcohol. And it's not always apparent, like physically, like just looking at somebody that they've eaten or smoked weed. I mean, or vice versa. There's some people that look like they have and they don't. So, whereas like I think the symptoms of alcohol are pretty straightforward. That's my opinion. So I don't know. I don't know how.
To me, it's a fascinating thing because it's not the same. We don't have the historical reference of how to deal with it like we do alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right.
Well, and so like this is the thing. Like alcohol, you can smell in your breath, right?
Right.
So it's legitimate for an officer to say, "Well, I think I smell booze. Let me administer a field sobriety test," or give you the option to go down and get a blood test or a breathalyzer. Okay, can't do that with weed because what if I ate it? I didn't smoke it.
Or what if I had a gummy?
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
You ain't smelling shit.
Right. No. Oh, you smell like you have gummies on your breath, and you got a big bag of Haribo gummies in there, and now you're going to get into this argument. Oh, you're just trying to cover. It's like I said to me, the getting people for being impaired on weed is a completely different argument and a process. And like most things we do in the country, we don't think about the second, third order effects. Everybody wants to have that legalized because it makes them feel good. Right? I don't mean the process of smoking, but like we got our way and we won. Yeah. Well, what's the administrative tail with that decision? Right. I think that's any decision in life. But when you start talking about something that one human can potentially adversely affect another human in a vehicle, what's the administrative tail now? And is that a major concern? I don't know.
Right.
Right.
Well, see, part of it too is the fundamental impairment that happens is quite different. Weed doesn't impair you the same way that alcohol does, for instance. I'm not saying you're not impaired. Nobody that's watching this in the future don't understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're not impaired.
Jason Pittman, phone number, an email, call him at
the real Jay Pittman.
Yeah, you can. That's fine. Don't call me. I ain't picking the phone up. It's just not the same thing. So you run into the same conversation of, I don't know. I mean, I guess this is a question we could ask somebody that's law enforcement. How do you catch somebody for driving while impaired when it's not alcohol? I mean, like, how do you come to suspect that they're high? Well, they'll say things like pinpointed pupils and whatever, right? I don't know. I don't know, man. I think you ought to get it right.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, my friends, you all can keep the conversation going, but I got to go. I got classwork I got to get done.
Say it ain't so, Daniel.
Yeah. So I will. You all have a great week.
You
too.
Everybody.
Well, we can call it there, and we'll just catch up next week. Maybe we'll talk about COBOL again.
There we go. It's still going to be around.
Yeah.
Everybody have a happy Easter and a good week.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.